Last week we looked at different methods of understanding first customer journeys on mobile applications, mobile enabled features and why they're so important. But now the big question is, how do you build these things, right? How do you go about building, planning, redesigning or assessing whether you actually need to build a mobile presence? Now, mobile presence can be developed in different ways, right? You can develop a mobile presence by pretty much just developing a mobile browser for your own company, for your own business. Or you can go about creating a mobile application for every single platform for your business. So there are two ways to go about developing it, right? There are companies who actually go and do both. But the problem with that is that it can be quite costly, right? Now, if you don't have millions of pounds of budget, that can become a real issue. And most companies do not have those big budgets, and therefore it becomes quite hard to go and do both. But if you did both as a business, you're very likely to reach out to more customers, right? Because you have always these groups of customers who love apps. They will probably never visit your mobile browser if you didn't have an app. Or you have these groups of people who don't mind, as long as they can access your services, whether that's a mobile version of your website or a mobile app, they would be happy with it. So, serving all these people, it becomes quite hard, right? And it becomes quite expensive. But knowing and understanding the amount of numbers and the growth in mobile usage is incredible. Okay? And you're talking about by 2015 the numbers to range from billions, right, of users. Now, those numbers, as we discussed in some of the seminars, right, those numbers can mean business to you. Not all of them, but those numbers can mean business to any organization. And so, can you just ignore and not do anything about it? Of course not. That's why mobile is now probably the fastest growing industry you can think of. So what we're going to look into today, we're going to look at types of apps. We really need to understand what types of apps are out there. What are some of the key features that we need to be thinking about? How do you go about processing, developing, doing the market research for new apps and new applications for a business, right? Then we'll look at the cost, different ways of identifying people that might help you to develop these apps. Then after that we're going to look at some of the agencies that are quite popular in London that do build mobile applications and things like that. Now the important thing about it is that some of those do actually share with everyone some of their projects that they do on mobile apps, which is quite interesting because you can go and see what they've done. Sometimes they share a bit about costing and the time they spend and the design and how challenging it is, and that's quite interesting. In fact, I strongly encourage you to start and try and see and search for those agencies that actually share some of these things with all of us. And then later on we're going to look at pros and cons of developing these apps in-house or outside, and then your activity for next week. So that's all we want to do today. First, types of apps. Now, normally you have two types of apps really. First types of apps are the apps that generate income. Now, they can generate income in two ways. Through offering a free app, right? But then providing opportunity for customers to buy inside that app, and that is called in-app types of advertising, right? Or you could sell the app, which is a commercial one, 0.99 pence or whatever it is, and then you generating some profit. So that is generate income types of apps, right? The second group of apps are quite interesting because the second groups of apps, they are actually not selling stuff, but what they're doing is that they are promoting their business or their service through these apps. So what they're doing is that they don't care too much about selling things through these apps, but they are interested to provide a service for their customers. Sometimes it can be tips and tricks to use their products and services. Sometimes it can be just an entertainment around their business idea. So they're not selling anything. Sometimes they might be offering ads in their app so they can make some money. But most of them are purely about promoting services and products. And that is quite interesting. Why? Because that is same as investing in all your marketing channels to promote your business. You are investing in building an application to promote your service. So it's more or less a marketing effort. So it's like a new channel for businesses to reach out to more people by offering something different. Now, before we get into mobile platforms, it's very important to distinguish the two big differences when it comes to the two major and most recognized platforms in the web in the industry today. And that's Android iOS from Google, and that runs in JavaScript. So Java is the main programming language for this app. And the other important thing is that it's an open type of platform, which means that other people can tailor, can change things for their own need. And therefore what's happening is that you have almost every mobile manufacturer in the world today that embraces different types of versions of Android for their phones. Which means that normally when you develop an app for Android, it might render very well in some phones, but not in every single phone. And that becomes a problem. Okay? So that is the issue. The other thing with the Android iOS is the fact that as long as you have registered yourself as a developer, right? You don't have to worry about anything, but as long as you have also developed the app, all you have to do is just publish it, and that's fine. There are no strict guidelines for you to make sure that you are ticking all the boxes before the app goes in the store. Which means that you might end up having a bit of too much poor performing apps in the Play Store. Okay? And that becomes a problem. And how do you stand out? So that is the other thing, of course, as I said, is the fact that you normally, it's impossible to build like an app that will render well in every single Android device. It's really hard. Because there are so many different types of software running in so many different types of mobile phones. Android mobile phones, right? So that's what you need to remember when it comes to iOS, Android. And it runs JavaScript. Then you have the big guys, then you've got Apple with iOS, and it runs in Objective-C, and it's pretty much an application that is not used widely in the industry from other companies, but it's pretty much used by iOS developers, and therefore it is not open, and you all know it. It's like a closed system, very, very strict indeed. And if you wanted to build an app for the iOS, for the Apple, of course you will need to make sure that every single guideline that they have asked you, you have to respect them. From the keywords, from the content, from the layout, the navigation, all sorts of things, you have to tick every single box before they even review your app. Okay? And therefore they're super strict to make sure that the apps that go in the App Store, most of them are good quality apps. And that is the case. If you have tried both devices, you probably have noticed this. That you can start to see the quality of apps in the App Store and the quality of apps in the Play Store. And you might argue that the idea of checking things stops people from just publishing any sort of really poor performing app. Whereas with the Apple, it's slightly hard to do that. When it comes to cost, signing up for iOS, Android as a developer doesn't cost anything. But as soon as you want to submit your app, you have to pay around $29, I think. Whereas with Apple, it's $99. Okay? So with Apple, you sign up, you download the Objective-C for free, you don't have to worry about it. But then as soon as you want to enroll into their program, submit the app and things like that, you have to do the $99 payment. What is the next thing after this? Of course, is the development journey that I call. Now, development journey is very important. It might change from different types of applications you develop and maybe different type of software or websites that you might develop. But the most important one is the big question. What you want to do and why you're doing it. Big question mark. Like pretty much on everything you do. And I think that's sometimes the most ignored one anyway. Lots of startups tend to build some of these apps, or lots of companies tend to build those apps, but they actually don't know why they're doing it. What is the specific need that you want to cover with the app? Okay, is that supporting a customer? Is that promoting a specific product? Is that just talking to customers that can't access other types of channels? What it is? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And that is the big question. So in other words, that's the moment we're going to brainstorm and think about that idea and develop it. The next thing, the next stage is writing down the specification plan. Okay, once you know what you're doing, then you start to say, okay, well, let me write it down. And that specification plan becomes like a structure for your app. And the next thing is, of course, you either do it yourself or you get a team of people who start to implement that specification plan you've written to do the design. In that specification plan, you will have all the description about the app, all the wireframes about each and every single page in the app, what it will do, and then when this needs to be done, like a milestone of a project management about developing this app. That thing then gets passed on to the design team, where based on the specification you have developed, and in most times it can be a manager who does that, and not actually developers in specification plan. Then developers, in the design part of it, they actually look at what you ask them to do through the mock-ups and wireframes, and they start to build up exactly those pages that you ask them to do. Then, once they've done it, they start to design, build, and develop. In here, both in these two places, there are these milestones or sign-off processes. When things get signed off, are we happy with it? Everyone's happy, move on. And those sign-offs are so important because you don't want to end up developing something that nobody likes. You're really going to make sure that you have these processes put in place. And that goes for pretty much every single other application as well, not just the mobile. But mobile is a lot more difficult to do. The next process, after you've signed that, you've done that, of course, you've developed something and there's a testing in place. Now sometimes you have in-house testing, where you're just getting people to do it. Sometimes you bring people from outside, you get them in one place and then get them to test it. Now this is really important. Why? Because if you go about testing it inside, within the company, you might have people who already seen these things before in the development process, and therefore they might already know how to use it. Which is not real full testing. But if you bring people from the outside and that have never seen the app, you put them together, and then you'll record them while they're using the service to start to see if they can make sense of it. And normally that is the most effective way of developing the app, because you are having people that have never seen the app, they have never seen the structure, the specification plan, for actually doing it and trying things out. And of course, the last but not least thing in the market is launching the app. You've done the homework, you've done everything else, you launch the app. Now, in a while we'll be talking about ways of promoting the app. Okay, so you've done everything right, but during this process there are some other things you can do to prepare the market for your app. Okay? Now, let's look at it now. let's look at something really important when you start developing an app. And that is what we call the market research, which that we do for pretty much everything. So, you've come up with an idea, and you know what you want to do and why you want to do it. The next thing that you want to do is actually go and do some homework and market research. Now, market research is part of every single project you will do outside of the industry. Every single one. First one, you will go to the App Store and actually see what are other apps of similar type of nature that you're trying to build. So this way you start to understand who the competitors are. What kind of apps they build. How do they look like? Can we build something that they don't have? Right? So you start to inform yourself about anything that you want to build. Or you might already have an app, but you're going in the App Store to see who your competitors are. Or in the Play Store. And trying to see what they can learn from them and build something original. So this process really feeds the development process itself. Right? The next one is that you've identified competitors. You start to see what do they do. What are some of the things that do very well? What are the things that they do very bad? Okay? And after that, you start to think and build up an idea who that typical customer of yours is. And that's when things start to make a lot more sense. Because depending on the customers you will serve, that's the app that you need to build. Right? So, normally, it's something that lots of companies, according to research, get that wrong because they don't do homework. They don't really understand what they're doing with their apps. Now, sometimes you are probably downloading an app, start to use it, and it just doesn't make sense to you. Well, that one reason could be because that app hasn't actually been developed for a group of face like yourself. Right? And so that's because the company hasn't done enough research to understand who their typical customers are going to be. After that, of course, you do the analysis of everything you found, and you start to developing that plan, of course, and you start to launch normally some of those services or products through the app which has been developed in the previous development journey that I call it. Next, for every app development, just like for everything that we do in business, if you don't have a plan, you pretty much are meant to, one way or another, sooner or later to fail. Now, if you don't have a long-term plan, this is what normally will happen. If you're very successful, you get your app in the App Store submitted. Of course, Play Store is not a big deal. You can submit pretty much everything you like. The next thing, you've got a press release, people talking about it, friends sharing it and all of that. And then a bit of media review, whatever it is, people talk about your app, somebody reviews on YouTube. But then, boom, immediately goes down. Now, if you invested so much money in the app, you're not going to see any light at the end of the tunnel. You're just going to go down. But for some reason, if you have a slightly different plan, then things will work out much better. If you know that you have decided to develop an app, you start to build up an idea, you start to build up an audience before that. That can be done through blogs, social media, right? But having a plan to engage and provide content to that typical, group of customers that you want to serve. Of course, after that, in fact, the marketing and promotion starts before you actually launch the app. Similar could be to, project could be like developing a book, right? Lots of authors, they start publishing work, articles, things like that, around the content on their book, right? So they build up an audience. And as soon as they've done that, then they say, oh, by the way, you guys that really like things that I've done in the past, why don't you buy my book? Because it's out there now. Now, similar, not exactly the same, but similar with the app, if you are providing content or useful feature on your website around the service you want to provide in your app, You're likely to get people to come in, to engage with you, so then when the app is published in the App Store, you will immediately be known for that. The next thing is, of course, having a social media put in place, where you're telling everyone, hey, we've got a new cool app, please check that out. And you have a plan on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, everywhere. Now that keeps the momentum going, right? It doesn't let things go down. Now as soon as you've helped the development, that momentum going up, you're going to have some rise of sales. You're going to start selling it a bit more. Then after that, as soon as it starts dropping down, the interest from people, you release a new update. Some cool new feature, right? How many times you used apps, did you kind of got bored with them at some point? Right? Why was that? Because if it was a game, you tried all levels. And you've done really well, there's nothing else to do there anymore. And it's boring. Now, the next thing, as soon as the interest starts to go down, then they release a new update, boom, it goes up. Right? So as you can see, there's a rise and low, similar to, you know, the heart rate, right? It just goes up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. But you've got to keep things going. And you've got to keep things going by having this plan. But unless you know this, unless you have the plan, you're stuck. Because all you're doing is that you are trying to do this, but you're not thinking about after that moment when the app has actually debuted into the App Store, has been launched in the App Store. And that goes same with every single other application that you develop, whether that's Android or BlackBerry. Now, how do you get started? As we said earlier, you identify, always remember, you identify the problem that you're trying to solve, or if you are assessing an app, you identify what is the problem, what is wrong with that app. Right? The next, analyze your competition, we've talked about it. Develop the target market. You start to build up who are those groups of people you want to serve to, right? And then evaluate how technical that app could be. Now we're going to look at the prices soon, right? But you'll start to see that depending on what you want to develop, that can be really costly. But the most important thing is understanding what are the resources you have in-house. What are the things you can build without having to go outside? Then of course, the other thing is making sure that how you're going to monetize it and what are the pricing figures you're going to use to do that, okay? Now, again, that goes back to what is it you're trying to do to the main question in the beginning. What is it you're trying to do within that one app? Are you trying to promote your services, or are you trying to make some money out of it? Now, if you start to think about monetizing it a bit more, then you start to think about pricing. Now, how do you make sure that the pricing is right? Well, of course, you do competitive analysis. You start to go out and see what are other types of competitors of yours doing with their mobile apps, and how much they're charging people, what are services they offer, what are the features, and you start to make an idea about what to do next. So you see, market research becomes essential in pretty much everything we do. And having really good market skills, market research skills, is really essential. And you've seen that with your assignments as well, right? You always have these group of students who've got like 15, 20, 25, 30 references in the pieces of work. They pretty much looked everything they could, right? And you know that the quality of information and the quality of analysis in most cases is really good. Because they look at the journals, they look at the books, they look at publications, white papers, all sorts of things, right? And they have so much info that developing and putting something together that is really good is not going to be a difficult task. And it's the same with business. Now, that is the skill that you develop here at university that will serve you for the rest of your lives. But get it right, get it good, really grasp that skill. Okay, don't be lazy to really improve that research skill, because that'll really save you, right? That will set you apart from everybody else. Because every company in the world wants to make 100% sure that when they made a decision, because of your market research, they're making a good decision, because you have done a good job. You don't want companies that are you working with to listen to your report that is weak, that is superficial, to make a decision to go or not to go to the marketplace. Remember, they might give you a task to go and check whether they should build a presence in developing countries. Right? You go and have a good time. India, China, all sorts of places, right? And then you come back and say, yep, all research done, fantastic. This is the report, it looks really good. Okay? And we should go ahead and do this. That could break the company. Okay? And of course, these roles will be trusted once you build up the credibility with your company, right? But you've got to be really, really careful and make sure that that skill gets developed as much as possible. Next, what's the assessment process? When developing an app, normally that could be done for developing websites as well. But of course, project starts in there. We've talked about this a little bit, but then as soon as you start to go down, you have the scoping and discussions meetings as well, where you start to see terms and conditions for developing that app or that software for that matter. Then concept development gets reviewed again and again. And then, of course, an important element is try and make sure, as I said to you, that if that service is going to be protected, you will have to set up non-disclosure agreements with people around, so then they're not going to go and do the same thing. Okay? You don't want to end up starting to develop an app and someone, even within your company, has actually gone and developed something similar to yours. Right? So that's pretty much a process that one can go to assess and understand how much will it take and what are those key stakeholders that will be involved in the process. Now let's quickly, I don't want to get into much details because we're not in computer science school. If we were, I would really go in all sorts of places when it comes to developing apps, because it's quite an interesting process, but let's try and look from a business perspective. But we've got to touch here and there some key ideas. When you design, of course, mobile apps, you start to design those custom apps, icons in your kind of service or the app that you want to develop. And of course, you start to make sense how things work, how things don't work in terms of your business process. And one of the key tools that helps us to get these things right, now that's just an example, is what we call A and B testing. What did we say A and B testing was? Do you remember?
Working to similar things beside each other and seeing which people like better.
Yeah? So A/B testing is pretty much an opportunity, a tool that allows us to test different versions of our project with different groups of people. Right? Now that is really important. Why? Because you start to build up an idea of the route that you need to take and the design and look and things like that. Now, that is really important, again, not just in this case for designing an app icon, but actually for every single part of the process, right? And again, large companies have got a really clear process put in place to do A/B testing, because they can afford it. Because A/B testing needs to be supported what? By a database somewhere, that we track some information, we save some information on the usage from people, and you know which group did what. But that's a really important process. Next one, when it comes to mockups, toolkits, right? There are so many software, there are so many things out there you can use. And in this case, I've got one from Apple that I'm going to show it to you, but there are so many out there. Now, as I said to you earlier, you might be involved with the marketing department in developing a mobile presence, right? But they're not going to ask you to design an app. But what they'll ask you to put together a structure, a mock-up of that idea that you have in your head. You can't just go and say, I've got a really cool idea because during the shower this morning, I thought we can sell these services, these things, it's just all really nice, really amazing, right? And everyone's going to look at you like, what do you mean by that? Why don't you go down, take your computer and develop something for us, design something for us, show us the mock-up, what are you trying to say, right? And so tell us what is exactly that you're recommending, and then we'll take it from there. So in other words, not just technical people do that. In most cases, it are actually managers who do that. Because technical people, designers and developers, they don't care about management. They just sit down, boom, 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 with the music, everything going on, and they just create. That's what they do, that's their job. In fact, they hate to ask them to manage anything. Okay, and I've had experience in working with some really great developers in London, and of course you start to see that they have 10, 15, 20 years of experience. They all want to be just told what to do, and that's it. And they'll go in their world and they start to develop and build things. And when they're ready, they start to put things together. But as a manager, your role is to make sure that everyone does a job by a specific deadline. Things are showcased to the senior directors, and then things are signed up by yourself and by the client, and then move on to the next stage. Now, that's a toolkit from Mock-App, which pretty much any one of you can download it if you wanted to play around with it. And all of these every single element that you see in here can be edited to start to create an idea about what you're recommending, what is that kind of app you want to build. Now, you can build a mock-up in PowerPoint, Keynote, Word, anywhere really. Okay? In Microsoft Word it's quite hard to do that, but in many other applications you can develop a mock-up. Now, mock-up is really important. Why? Because you start to give a sense of what you're trying to do. And when you do the mock-up, when you have done the research, right? You have done research, you understand what your competitors are doing, and you start to pick up on the areas that you want to focus. After that, you start prototyping it. Of course, that is the bit that is done by the developers. That's not your role, but they will start to put layers of features on top of each other and start to make sense of things, right? And then these are the development process that is quite straightforward when it comes to testing it inside the company. I'm going to stop in the details technical bit. Let's look at something else. Developing apps can be a unique strategy in itself, right? Why? Sometimes free apps are designed to drive paid apps. That is a very clever strategy. And the best example of this is Angry Birds. Right? And the company, Robin company that designed Angry Birds, they've done something quite incredible. Right? How many of you played Angry Birds? Can I see your hands? Now, when I played several years ago now, it's been quite a while, right? And it was a free app, right? And you download it, it's free, you don't have to pay for it. And you start playing around with it, and I passed through every single level they were offering me for free. And I was like, that's really cool. I'm just going to buy it, 99p. Why would you buy it? But the strategy they built up, it was so fantastic that they've given you a taste of that fantastic Angry Bird fun. And as soon as you taste it, you say, I want this. Even though you might even play like once a month on it, you still will buy. And they sold so much, it's probably one of the most successful stores in the App Store. So they had a strategy put in place to say, okay, in the beginning they started with a light and they provided a paid app as well. But both of them were in the App Store, of course, on the top of the list, both of them. But in the beginning, they gave They started with a free and then they introduced the paid app as well. Just in case, if you're not sure whether you want to buy it or not, have a look at our free version, play around. If you like it, we know you'll love it, and they're going to come back and buy it. Right? Now, that really works. It feeds so well, that is incredible. And a company that did really well is these guys. If you're going to ask people to pay for the apps, right? And they have never seen anything, they have never tried it, they never see anyone using it, how are they going to trust you? Yeah, they'll see some reviews, okay, that does help. You see some positive reviews, and it kind of convinces you to buy that. But unless you have given people a chance to try it out, you would be losing lots of customers. You're converting lots of customers, you have lots of businesses that come to your site into customers, but many of them will leave. So when you have people coming into the App Store and searching out and checking out your app, most of them will probably not download it simply because they're not sure whether they need it or not. So mixing, organizing, and structuring a light app could actually drive paid apps too. And I wanted to show you that because that's a really interesting strategy to look into it. And that should be something you need to focus in terms of understanding and doing your research when you do for your own assignments. In-app advertising, of course, this is something that lots of companies do. They might offer a free app themselves and start to sell things or cool features in the app, or like new levels, or maybe provide other services within their application. And of course, that is what is called in-app advertising. Really successful business model that is working for lots of companies. But those who tend to do it quite well in terms of planning, understanding, knowing where these things go. In-app promotions, of course, it is really important to make sure that you provide a facility and make it super easy for those people who love your app to share with everyone else. Whether that's a Twitter, whether that's email, SMS, anything like that. It needs to be super clear. Because how many times you use applications that are you really like them, but you couldn't actually send it to a friend? How can you do that? Like, how can you tell people? You're going to go and type the name and they don't find it in the App Store and then click again, and blah, 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 blah. So it becomes quite hard. But when you make it so easy, what does that say to the business? You're likely to increase your conversion rate. And to have more people signing up for your app. Now you can see that very small, tiny little things make a huge difference. Because very small, tiny things about, like, offering people to share your app, if you didn't have this, even if only 10 people shared the app, would be good enough for you. But if you didn't have this, there'd be one sharing it. Now that's not good enough for business, is it? So what are the tools? We talked a little bit about this, but there are different ways. There are even some free app tools as well that allow you to build apps without the need for code. Now some of them are quite interesting, but some of them are quite expensive too. So you can, I think, in the app mark is free to start with, and then if you wanted to submit the app and develop it in the App Store, you have to pay around $199. But there are some of them that you can start just to use them for free. We've talked about Apple, iOS, and BlackBerry and the cost for developing apps in their site. Of course, that is for developers. This is non-developers. Now, chances of Apple accepting some of the application you develop in these websites or software are not that high. But of course, there are people who manage to do that, actually develop apps through these websites or software and then submitting those into the App Store. And I think this is interesting because it gives the power to people who do not have enough knowledge, they do not have enough skills to develop things, right? And it's quite interesting. However, remember, I'm a strong believer that if you've got all these great ideas, you should put them into writing and design them, but never try to become the best developing in the world when you're not. Okay? So don't fool yourself to try and think, okay, I can do this, it's not a problem, or I can learn, blah, blah, blah. Of course you can learn, but it'll take a longer time before you're actually able to get to stage to any developers develop maybe 5, 10 apps, successful app in the App Store, right? So, unless you're really passionate about it, then you start to learn and really develop your skills, start to build your apps. But unless you're passionate about it, stick to developing, a specification plan and leave things to designers and then developers. But normally, it's something, as I said, you can try it yourself as well and have a look at it. What are the other options of developing apps? Well, one could outsource them, right? You've developed a specification plan, you've done the market research, you've developed a specification plan, now you're stuck. Because you don't know how to build it. It could actually be that that's your new business. You're building an app to sell your business idea. You're building an app because you want to reach out to more people. And you've done the specification plan, you've done everything, but you're struggling to build that. So what do? You go and talk to agencies in London. They're really expensive, you can't afford them. But in a good way, as long as you had a good detailed plan of developing your app, you can actually outsource the work to some of these websites. Now, in these websites, they're really big, they're really large websites, from developing websites, blog templates and themes, to building mobile apps. And in this place, the way how this works is quite interesting. Because in these websites, you're developing a specification plan, you're going out there, you're creating an account, you're publishing it, and that work is open to everyone, and developers from around the world are going to start to pitch for the work that you've just published. And so people start to tell you how experienced they are, and how much work, similar work to yours they have done, how great teams they have, blah, 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 and then how much ultimately they'll charge you. And you start to review all these offers you get from other people, you pick the one that suits your need. And you have, I've used many of them, Odesk, Elance, all sorts of websites, but the biggest problem is the one that doesn't go away, the fact that you don't get to see these people, and they could be doing all sorts of projects that you have no control over, and yours could wait somewhere there until they've done with everything else that they have taken from the website, right? So sometimes it becomes like a problem to keep track of these things and get things done through the deadline. So, however, keep some of these websites in your bookmark, because it can help you one day if you're being asked to develop something or to do something, but you've got no budget. You can always approach these guys, and we've used them in the past. Sometimes some of them are quite quick, some of them are, quality is okay, not that great, but of course you get what you pay for. And so if you really want excellent quality, then you go into the agencies in London, and they'll do a good job for you, and they'll charge you lots of money. So I'll see now in a minute. Okay, now cost for developing apps. Now if you really want to develop a decent app, I think when it comes to the online outsourcing one, you can probably develop apps with low cost, which are pretty much between £3,000 and £10,000. Then you have around £10,000 to £35,000 moderate types of applications that have a little bit of features in there about sign-up processes, linked to a database, maybe a bit of engagement with the audience. And then you've got £35,000 and up applications. We call them elite, those really, really detailed inside applications that give you everything you could think of, from mobile e-commerce to you buy things, to like sign-up processes, watching content, engaging, and all sorts of things. So those can go even up to £100,000 or £200,000, depending on the infrastructure that it needs behind the scene. Now remember, this is really important. As much as it costs to develop an app, an expensive element of that process is what? The infrastructure as well, right? You've got to have infrastructure to support that app. Now, infrastructure can be expensive. And what do I mean by infrastructure? The servers, the developing, and all of that, supporting, and all of that. The infrastructure put in place where you're going to support this front-end technology that is sitting in front of your customers. And that infrastructure sometimes can be very expensive and can raise the cost. Now, as I said, when it comes to developing, in terms of hours, you can spend from 100 to 400 hours or more to develop these apps. Because on those outsourcing websites, we can go and ask people to build things for you. They charge you based on hour. You say, I've developed a specification plan, here are my mock-ups, and I want you to develop them. They'll tell you it'll take me 15-20 hours to do this. And that'll cost you, I charge people $15 an hour, £15 an hour, that'll cost you 300 or 400 pounds. Yeah? Of course, the quality is not going to be great, but you can start to build something so then you can show to people your idea that you have. Now, the app has been developed, the app is successfully running into the marketplace. What is it we need to do next? What can you think of that you've got to do to start to understand where are people coming from, how much they're using it, and what are the benefits of the app that we have already built? Well, mobile analytics allow us to do just that. They allow us to understand processes behind the scenes on mobile usage of the app that we've developed. Now, there are several ones. Of course, they're all paid. Most of them that do a good job, they're paid versions, so they're not cheap. But they give you pretty much what Google Analytics will give you. The whole idea about where people are accessing your applications from, how much time they're spending in your app, how long they're staying in your app, and most of the time, what time of the day do these people come and use your app. So they give you some really detailed information about the application, and that's really interesting. Why? Because you take that information, you feed into your app to develop something, so then the next version, the next update is really insightful for your users. Because that's how you're going to keep the rhythm going, right? That's why you're going to get excited for your customers as well. You're going to start to build excitement throughout the time. Now, every time you go and see updates in the App Store, right? You get a bit excited, right? Oh, there's an update on Skype. Let's see what that new update is. You always wait to see there's something new, there's something different, right? And that's the thing for the users. You need to keep the rhythm, the momentum going. And with the updates, that's how you do that. But how do you know what to do next? Of course, you are informed with the engagement that you have with your customers. Of course, Flurry, this is a huge platform, really, really big, and used by all sorts of companies in the world today to start to understand about the data and start to make sure that you can replicate those data in developing your apps and making sure that you understand how you can acquire more users based on these things. Now, of course, they provide several packages on understanding usage, how much time somebody's spending an app, where they're coming from, how often do they access it, and so on and so forth. So really, insights on analytics. And this is when you start to see what's happening with that excellent project of yours that you have developed. And analytics allow us to do that. Now, what are the key pitfalls to avoid? Well, the first and foremost is measure and test. We really got to measure, we really got to test. Now, as soon as we've developed something, we've got to measure how good that is, and then we start to build up an idea about what are the things that we can improve. poor performance and lack of usability. So again, these feed into each other's role, right? You've got to make sure you test them so then you have a good performance, not a poor performance, because as soon as you make your customers wait while using the app, they could go, delete that, and never come back again. You might have improved your app so much that it's better than any other app out there, but they're not coming back to you. Because they have given you a chance and you have failed. That is why, because customers now have got so much choice, you don't get a chance to make a second impression. Same in life, right? You have only one choice to make that first impression. If that first impression is no good, you're not getting anywhere. And it's the same with business. And now with all of these new technologies giving us chances to build things faster, you will be given a very, very short time to perform. Promoting your apps, of course, the best way to do that is through making sure that you have a good website presence. You're really telling people you've got a really good app. Now that's like a wireframe that I talked to you about earlier, where you start to build up an idea of how do you want things in your website. In the website, normally it's really good to have a domain name, which is of the same name that your app holds to. It works with Google ranking, it works with the Apple as well, so you have building a brand consistency, so it works well. And then of course you allow people to share, we talked about this earlier. And then one of the things from, for instance, a breadcrumbs kind of app, that's how it looks like their website. So in other words, they are promoting their app within their website very clearly, nicely, just same as Apple does in the website too. Social media presence, that's like a cover sheet, cover photo on Twitter. Can be the same thing on Facebook too. You keep doing the same thing. Now before selling, you can start to collect data. You can start to say, oh guys, we're building this app. If you want to be the first to know, please give us your email, we'll tell you. And that really does work. So you're starting to collect data, collect information. When your app is live, boom, you're going to email everyone and let them know that your app is live, and then that could boost your application usage straight away. And of course, other things that you could do with the app is offering home screen bookmarking opportunity that looks really nice and beautiful. Gift app, App Store allows you can allow people to give those apps to their friends. Mobile versions of your website. In other words, that website we talked about earlier, it needs to be mobile friendly, because this way people can see in their mobile the app where they can tap and download it. Social media sharing, and of course free copies for sharing communities. I call them sometimes sharers. Okay, those people just share so much, right? We need to make sure that we reward them for doing that job, right? And give them a chances to share more things with their friends. Now, London agencies, most popular ones are here. I'll stop here because it's 11 now. But of course, those are just some advantages we already talked about now on using, outsourcing the work to other websites that can actually do some of the development. We talked about big challenges when it comes to time, usability, testing, and ultimately how to control these people from wherever you are.